It's always the quiet ones who shake the walls when they finally speak. What would you do if the system built to protect you turned its back instead? Let us know in the comments section below, and stay with us to see how one decision, made in silence, might just echo across an entire institution. Wil Greene hadn't spoken more than 10 words during the entire morning drive to the pension office. His granddaughter, Ashley, had offered to come, said she could help navigate the forms, even rearranged her college class schedule to make it work. But Willie had declined with the kind of finality that left no room for second attempts. He didn't need help reading a form. What he needed was for people to do their damn jobs. He wore the same dark green field jacket he'd worn every year on this date since 2005, the year he filed his first VA pension claim. Inside the left pocket was a folded copy of his service records: Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, Bronze Star, 2 commendations for leadership under fire, and 1 long scar that ran across his right shoulder to his back. The documents had frayed at the corners, the scar hadn't. He stepped through the glass doors of the Wilcox Regional Veteran Affairs office and into the numbing hum of fluorescent lights. The carpet was the color of dry oatmeal, and everything smelled faintly like old printer toner and burned coffee. A few chairs in the waiting room were filled with younger vets scrolling through their phones, their ball caps and inked arms quietly broadcasting different stories of different wars. Willie stood at the front desk, waiting. Sandra Klein noticed him, but took another slow sip of her travel mug before acknowledging his presence. She looked down at her monitor and then back at him without much movement in between. "Name?" "Wil Greene," he said. "Appointment at 10. Her nails clicked against the keyboard. "ID?" He handed it over. Her eyes flicked from the screen to his card and back. "Hear about a claim?" "Appeal," he said. "Been 10 months. She grunted. "Take a seat. We'll call you when we're ready." He didn't move. "Ma'am, I was told someone from pensions would meet with me directly." "They'll call you," she repeated without looking up again. Willie turned, sat down, and folded his hands over his lap. His fingers were rough. Too many years of fieldwork, maintenance, cold metal, and desert heat. His breathing was slow, but there was a storm gathering under his skin. He'd faced down enemy fire with less tension in his jaw. 23 minutes later, the intercom clicked. "You Wil Greene, desk 6. Willie stood, nodded slightly to the young vet with crutches seated beside him, and walked to the indicated cubicle. Behind the desk sat a man no older than 35, hair gelled into a little helmet, crisp shirt, a tie too tight for comfort. His badge read, B. Kramer, Claims Officer. "Have a seat, Mr. Greene." Willie sat. "So," Kramer began, flipping open a folder that had clearly just been placed in front of him. "You're here to check on your appeal." "I'm here to get an answer." "Right." Kramer's tone flattened. "Well, after review, it looks like your pension claim remains ineligible. It's been evaluated under the post-1991 criteria. Unfortunately, we don't have enough documentation that links your current disability to active service." Willie blinked once. "I submitted hospital records from Fort Bragg, MRI scans from the VA hospital, a statement from my company CO." "Yes," Kramer said, nodding like it mattered, "but without a formal incident report or any injury file during active duty, the connection isn't strong enough. That's per the guidelines." Willie didn't move. "You're telling me the pain in my spine, which the Army gave me, isn't the Army's responsibility?" Kramer sighed. "Mr. Greene, I understand this is frustrating, but the VA has to operate under federal protocol. We don't make the rules. You enforce them." "That's right," he said quickly. "We enforce the ones we're given, even when they're wrong." Kramer leaned back, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I appreciate your service. I really do. But no," Willie said, and his voice was suddenly sharper, colder. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to sit behind a desk and tell me you appreciate a damn thing, not when you're the one holding the door shut." For a moment the hum of the office seemed to quiet. Kramer looked around, shifted in his chair. "Mr. Greene, I'm going to ask you to remain civil." Son, I bled so you could sit there and say those words to me without understanding them. That's about as civil as I can be." Kramer stiffened. "If you'd like to submit an additional appeal—" "There's nothing more to submit," Willie interrupted. "This is the fourth denial in 6 years. I brought everything you asked for. I followed every rule. I stood in every line. But now you're telling me my spine didn't collapse under 120 pounds of gear because some paperwork got lost in the shuffle?" Silence. Then Kramer glanced toward a small panic button under his desk, the move too quick for Willie to miss. Willie stood before Kramer could flinch. "You push that button," Willie said, low and steady. "You better make sure the cavalry that walks through that door is ready for something real." He walked out of the cubicle before Kramer could respond, past Sandra at the front desk again. This time she actually looked up. But Willie didn't stop. He walked outside, stepped into the sun, and pulled a small flip phone from his pocket. His thumb hovered over one number. Then he pressed it. "Alan?" he said, when the voice on the other end picked up. "It's time." He didn't say anything else. Just hung up, folded the phone, and leaned against the wall. The war had taught him patience. The army had taught him discipline. But some things, even after all these years, still deserved a fight. By the time Willie returned home, the adrenaline had already started to drain, leaving behind the familiar stiffness in his joints and the dull, hollow ache that settled in his lower back. He didn't say a word as he dropped his keys onto the table beside the front door, the clink of metal against wood echoing in the silence of the house. Ashley was sitting at the kitchen counter, her laptop open, earbuds hanging loose around her neck. She stood up when she saw his face. "How'd it go?" she asked gently. He didn't answer immediately, just walked past her to the sink and poured himself a glass of tap water with steady, deliberate hands. After a long sip, he set the glass down and looked at her. They said no. Her expression fell. "Again?" He nodded once. Ashley's eyes filled with fire, her jaw tightening. "That's not right, Grandpa. You've got evidence, that CO letter, medical records, everything." "Don't matter," Willie said. "Not to them." He walked slowly to the chair by the window, the same chair he sat in when he didn't want to talk, but couldn't quite sit in silence either. Ashley followed him, arms crossed tight across her chest, trying to contain the tremble that threatened to rise in her voice. "You're not giving up, are you?" He looked at her for a long second, and then smiled. "Just barely." "I need a call." She blinked. "To who?" "An old friend." Before she could ask again, his phone vibrated on the table. Willie reached for it and answered with a curt, "Yeah?" He listened for a few seconds, then said, "All right, I'll meet you there." Willie stood up with a little more purpose in his spine. "Where are you going?" Ashley asked. "To see someone who still remembers what leadership looks like." An hour later, Willie pulled into a small parking lot behind a weathered building in downtown Raleigh. The sign above the door had faded over time. Veterans Brotherhood Community Center. He hadn't been inside in years. When he walked through the door, the smell of coffee and old paper hit him. Framed photographs lined the walls. Men and women in uniform, black and white shots from Korea, Vietnam, Iraq. Names etched on a plaque above the fireplace, faces long gone. A few older men sat at the folding tables playing cards or reading newspapers. One of them looked up and smiled. "Wil Greene, thought the Army lost you to a cabin in the mountains." Willie gave a faint chuckle. "They tried." At the back of the room, near the office, stood a tall man in a navy blue blazer. His back was straight, shoes polished, and his face bore the heavy creases of both command and compassion. He turned when he heard Willie's voice. "Gran McIntyre." They shook hands firmly, with the silent acknowledgement of men who'd seen things no civilian conversation would ever touch. General Alan McIntyre had retired 5 years ago, but he still carried himself like a man who could walk back onto base tomorrow and take command without missing a beat. "I got your call," McIntyre said, motioning for Willie to follow him into the office. Once inside, he closed the door and leaned against the desk. Tell me what happened." Billy recounted it, the tone in the claims officer's voice, the look on Sandra Klein's face, the way the VA treated his file like it was an inconvenience, not a life. He kept his voice steady, but something in his posture, how he sat forward just slightly, how his hand stayed still in his lap, told McIntyre everything he needed to know. When it was over, McIntyre remained silent for a moment. "Of the same office that handles the Raleigh Triangle region?" Willie nodded. The general's lips thinned into a line. "I trained half the staff there." "Not surprised." "But still—" "They denied me 4 times, Woolley interrupted. "I'm not the only one. I met a kid in the lobby this morning, 24, both knees gone, and they're sending him in circles. He doesn't know how to fight paper. We were trained to fight people, not systems." McIntyre looked down for a moment, and when he looked up again his voice was quiet, but harder than steel. "I should have known this would come." "You did," Willie said, "but now you need to act on it." The general nodded, then pulled a phone from his pocket. He didn't dial a number. He opened a saved contact. He waited for the voice on the other end. "This is General Alan McIntyre. I need access to the Wilcox Regional Office records. Yes. Starting with case ID 4471, name Greene, Willie, W.I. He paused, then said, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up and looked at Willie. "You riding with me?" Willie nodded. 35 minutes later, the general's black government SUV pulled into the VA parking lot, straight into the reserved space for authorized federal vehicles. It was Saturday, half-staffed, skeleton crew, but the people who mattered were inside. McIntyre walked through the front doors without hesitation, his medals displayed on his lapel. Willie followed behind, not because he needed protection, but because this time the system would see the face of rank it couldn't ignore. Inside, Sandra Klein looked up from her desk and immediately went pale. "General McIntyre," she stammered. He didn't stop walking. "Where's your regional director?" he asked, voice cutting through the room like a drill sergeant's bark. "Sir, it's the weekend. The director is off." "Then find whoever is next in line." Now, Sandra stood panicked, scrambling to grab the desk phone. Willie stood off to the side, watching the fear in her eyes flicker into place, like someone realizing they'd misjudged the terrain. Luis Romero, the young claims clerk, stepped out from behind the partition, holding a folder. "Sir?" he said cautiously. I flagged that file after the 3rd denial. I thought something didn't look right, but I was told not to touch it." Willie turned slowly. "Who told you that?" Luis hesitated. "Mr. Kramer." McIntyre's jaw clenched. "Bring me the case file, all of it, unredacted." Luis hesitated only for a moment before nodding and vanishing into the back office. McIntyre turned back to Sandra. "You're going to open that meeting room over there," he said, pointing to a glass-walled conference room, "and we're going to sit down and go through every rejected claim that looks like his. Because if I find out there's a pattern, I'm not just calling the Director General. I'm calling every veteran organization in this state and putting your name on the top of the list." Sandra didn't move. "Feeling his stimula? And an order?" she asked, finally. McIntyre stepped forward, nose to nose. "That's a promise." Willie didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just walked in behind the general, shoulders square, back upright, not because he needed the strength, but because he knew what they were about to do wasn't just about him. It was about every soldier who came home and was told, "We'll take care of you," only to learn that promises fade faster than scars. But not today. The door to the conference room clicked shut behind them, muting the quiet hum of the office and the whispered speculation that followed the general's entrance like a trailing shadow. Inside, the long oval table was bare except for a dusty binder, a broken stapler, and a half-dead ficus in the corner. McIntyre stood at the head, arms crossed behind his back like he had a platoon standing at parade rest in front of him. Billy remained seated, back to the door, eyes fixed on the glass wall that separated them from a world that still didn't know how to look a veteran in the eye. Luis Romero entered with 2 boxes of files, breathing harder than someone his age should have after a quick walk. I grabbed everything related to his claim and the surrounding caseload. That includes letters, internal notes, and correspondences between the office and the regional director's email chain. He placed them down gently, then added, "There's more I couldn't get without a supervisor keycard, but this—" He opened one file and slid it across the table toward McIntyre. "This is the one you'll want to start with." McIntyre opened it and read silently for a minute. Then his brow furrowed. He flipped a few pages, fished out a printed email chain clipped to the back, and read more carefully this time. Green file marked low priority, flagged as non-personable unless further political risk is established. He read aloud. Billy didn't flinch. "They said that to each other in email?" McIntyre nodded grimly. "They used my name. Yours and 15 others," Luis added, pulling out a second folder. "Pattern matches. Most are older vets, some from Vietnam, some Gulf. The newer ones, like that kid you mentioned, the one with the bad knees, they're pending under something called extended review. That's code for keeping it in limbo long enough for people to forget they applied." Willie leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "So they're stalling on purpose." Louise hesitated. "Sir, I don't think the frontline clerks know. This looks like something higher up. Kramer's initials are on most of these." "And your name, Miss Klein," McIntyre added without looking up, as Sandra entered the room reluctantly, a notepad clutched in her hand like a shield. "I was just following—" "No," McIntyre said, cutting her off with a look. "You don't get to say that line today." Sandra's lips compressed into a thin, defensive strip, but she didn't argue. She sat across from Willie, avoiding his eyes. "Miss Klein." McIntyre said calmly, "Do you know what it means to delay a file for strategic denial assessment?" She paused too long before answering. "It's an administrative tag." "Is it standard?" "And why is it on 17 different cases from this office?" Her jaw tightened. "That tag was created internally, by Kramer." "Did you report it?" "I didn't realize." "Don't lie to me, Sandra," McIntyre said, this time with the weight of command. "You have a master's degree in public administration, a decade in this office, and you didn't know something irregular was going on? I thought maybe it was policy shifting after the new funding tiers came in." Willie spoke before McIntyre could. "You knew it was wrong, but you didn't want to risk your job to fix it." The silence in the room said everything she couldn't. McIntyre took a slow breath. "You're not the only one in that boat. But here's the problem. When your job is helping veterans, and you start prioritizing yourself, people like Wil Greene fall through the cracks, and we both know that some of them don't have the fight left in them to get back out." He turned to Luis. "What's your role in all this?" Louise swallowed. "I flagged Willie's file last month, put a red note on it in the digital system, thinking someone higher up would take notice. A few days later, I was pulled into Kramer's office and told to focus on processing, not activism." "That's the exact phrase he used." Luis nodded. McIntyre looked at Willie and then back at the files. "We're going to escalate this, officially. I've got contacts at the Department of Veterans Affairs Oversight Committee, but I want to give you a choice, Willie." Willie raised an eyebrow. "You want to go public? Take this to the press, to the advocacy boards, make this into a national spotlight case? Or we handle it quietly, apply pressure inside, and fix it without anyone's name going in lights?" Willie was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "How many of those other names are alive?" Luis looked uncertain. "A few have passed. There's a Gold Star widow in there. One guy, Agent Orange exposure. He's on hospice." "Then we go loud?" Willie said. McIntyre gave a small, solemn nod. "Good." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of copied files, pulled email threads, and carefully documented notes. McIntyre dictated a memo for immediate review, then made a call to a regional deputy at the Pentagon, someone who owed him a favor and had just enough rank to poke the fire where it mattered. Outside the room, word had spread. Other veterans waiting in the lobby were watching the conference door like something important might walk out of it. One man approached the front desk and quietly asked if he could speak to whoever's in charge now. The receptionist glanced at the door. "They're in a meeting." The veteran replied, "Good, then I'll wait." Back inside, Luis finished printing a summary sheet and handed it to McIntyre. "This is every case denied under the same phrasing, same digital tags. If we submit this with oversight attached." "Do it," McIntyre said. He turned to Sandro. "You have a chance to walk out of this with dignity. You want to help fix what you've been part of, or do I need to request your immediate removal?" She stared at the floor. "I'll help. Then start by calling everyone in this stack," McIntyre said, pointing to the files. "One by one. Tell them someone's finally listening." Sandra looked across the table at Willie and for the first time really looked at him. "Sorry," she said quietly. "We should have done better." Willie didn't blink. "You still can." McIntyre glanced at the clock, then tapped his fingers on the table. "We'll give it 48 hours. If we don't see movement from the director's office by then, congressional oversight goes live. Understood?" Everyone nodded. Willie stood slowly, back cracking as he straightened to his full height. "You done fighting for today?" McIntyre asked with a wry smirk. "Never done," Willie said. "Just catching my breath." By Monday morning, something had shifted in the air at the Wilcox regional office. Not the temperature or the buzz of fluorescent lights, but something deeper. A current. An unease. And beneath it, something like resolve. Willie arrived at 9:03 a.m. Same jacket, same steady walk. Ashley was with him this time, her eyes bright and alert, one hand gripping a notebook and the other her phone, ready, she'd said, to record anything if things went sideways again. But Willie had just smiled. They won't. Not today. Inside, the waiting room was more full than usual, but there was a quiet to the crowd, like they were holding their breath for something. A few familiar faces nodded as Willie passed. One man in a wheelchair gave a subtle thumbs up. A woman with a binder on her lap whispered to her son, then smiled gently as Willie walked past. Luis was waiting by the desk, now wearing a white visitor badge that marked him as a temporary liaison under the Veterans Priority Audit Team label. "Morning, Mr. Greene," he said. "We've got a seat ready for you. The director's coming in, too." Willie glanced toward Sandra's old station. Empty. A younger woman sat there now, nervous and polite, eyes flicking toward him like she knew the story but wasn't sure she believed it. He followed Luis past the cubicles and through a door that now bore a fresh paper sign. "Internal review proceedings. Admittance by appointment only." Inside, McIntyre stood at the head of the room, flanked by two suits from the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. Their presence wasn't subtle. One had a legal pad open, already writing. The other had a voice recorder on the table, red light blinking steadily. "Good to see you again, Willie," the general said, his voice still crisp, but carrying a lighter tone today. Less command, more confidence. Willie sat across the table, Ashley settling beside him, her pen already moving across a fresh page. "We're going to start with an acknowledgement," said the man with the notepad. "This office mishandled your claim, but more than that, it mishandled the principle of service." Willis said nothing. The woman beside him, sharp-eyed, with a military haircut and a U.S. Navy pin on her blazer, added, "You weren't the only one affected, but today we're going to start making things right. With your case first." Luis handed over a thick folder. "Everything's verified. We found the missing field report from 1992, misfiled under another Greene from the same battalion. Once it was added to the system, the connection to his injury was undeniable." "Effective immediately," said the woman. "Your pension is reinstated, back paid to your original claim date with full medical coverage restored under Class A eligibility." Ashley gasped softly, and her hand trembled just a little where it clutched her pen. Willie's face didn't change, but his eyes did. That steel in them softened just enough. "There's more," McIntyre said. "This office will now operate under direct oversight for the next 12 months, and we've been authorized to establish a local Veterans Accountability Liaison role." He looked at Willie. "If you want it, it's yours, paid, flexible. You'd serve as a point of contact for veterans filing claims, helping them navigate the red tape." Willie's eyebrows lifted. "You offering me a job, General?" "I'm offering you a position," McIntyre replied, "because we need veterans guiding veterans, not just filing papers." Ashley leaned in. "He'll take it." Willie looked at her, one corner of his mouth turning upward. "Maybe I will." The rest of the meeting passed with quiet dignity. No raised voices, no drama, just a slow, deliberate unraveling of a mess that had been hidden under layers of indifference. Sandra Klein had submitted her resignation 2 days earlier. Kramer was on paid administrative leave, pending further investigation. And across the state, emails had gone out to every other regional office requesting a full audit of all claims tagged under Strategic Denial Review. As they walked out of the room, Ashley bumped her grandfather lightly with her shoulder. "You did it." "No," he said. "We did it. Took more than me. Took a general. Took a brave kid willing to speak up. Took too damn long." They walked past the waiting room again, and Willie paused. One of the men stood and approached him. His face was lean, sunburned, with the haunted eyes of someone who'd seen too much and hadn't yet made peace with it. "I heard what you did," he said. "For all of us, thank you." Willie shook his hand. "Don't thank me. Just don't stop pushing." By the end of that week, Willie's story had quietly spread. Not viral, not flashy, but real. Shared from one veteran to another, whispered across VFW tables, passed through church halls and support group circles. Veterans in 5 states began asking questions. Letters were sent. Old claims reopened. One Sunday afternoon, a package arrived at Willie's home. Inside was a single flag, folded tight. No note, just a seal on the corner. The insignia of the Office of Veterans Affairs. Ashley asked what it meant. He didn't answer right away. Finally he said, "It means someone over there remembered what this stands for." He placed the flag carefully on his shelf, beside a photo of his unit in Iraq, and another of him holding Ashley when she was still small enough to sit on his shoulders. The next morning he was back at the center, shirt tucked in, badge clipped to his belt. A young woman walked in with a crumpled envelope and too much anxiety in her eyes. Willie stood, nodded, and motioned her to sit. "Let's figure this out together," he said. And so they did.